We're very lucky today in having the son of the man that we're remembering, Sir Cyril Fox, and I'd like to welcome, and please welcome, Charles Scott Fox, who is going to say a few words about the history and his memories of living in this house. Over to you, Charles.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Rhiwbina Civic Society, representatives of the archaeological fraternity in Wales, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, may I thank you most sincerely for the honour and privilege of being invited to unveil this plaque in commemoration of my father, Sir Cyril Fox. To speak of him, of my wartime memories of this house and living in the village. Born in 1882, in 1919, aged 37, having served through the Great War, and with no academic qualifications, Fox was admitted to Magdalen College, Cambridge. 3 years later, as an outstanding student, he was awarded his doctorate as his first degree. He was appointed Keeper of Archaeology for the National Museum in 1925, and in July 1926 as its director, a post that he held for 22 years. He had married Olive Congreve Pridgeon in 1916, and their two daughters, Felicity and Penelope, were born in 1920 and 1923. When the family moved to Cardiff, they rented a property in Heath Park Avenue, near the Heath low-level station. But when Fox became director, with an increased salary of £600 a month, they looked to buy a house of their own. In an extension to the development in Rhiwbina by the Cardiff Workers' Cooperative Garden Village Society, 2 of the 5 plots on Heal Wen were still available. On 999-year leases, they came with a covenant that required them to be designed by the cooperative's architect, Alwyn Lloyd. This house and its neighbour were the 2 plots that were taken by my father and his keeper of botany, and his name was Harold Hyde. They were between the further on plot of a Mr. Gundry and Edward Lewis, and Edward Lewis was the cooperative's solicitor. Fox's immediate neighbours, Edward and his wife Amy, had 4 daughters, 2 of a similar age to their own, and they, as well as the Lloyds, became close friends. The design of all 5 Heal Wen houses reflected the arts and crafts style, which extended into internal fittings, and I've just been given the privilege of seeing inside, and you can still see some of these fittings, like the crittle windows, which were all part of the design of these houses. Oak parquet floors, steep oak uncarpeted stairs that I, my brother and sisters tumbled down on several occasions, fortunately without any apparent lasting damage, although some think otherwise. It was given the name 4 Elms from 4 massive specimens that were part of the northern and western hedgerows. The first fell in the late 30s, 2 more in the 40s, and all had gone when Dutch elm disease deprived us of these magnificent native trees. Now it is number 17, but fortunately I see it has been inscribed up there 4 Elms. The house had only 1 garage, this one here. But when Olive acquired her own car, a red and buff Triumph, known affectionately throughout the village apparently as the biscuit tin, they added a second, with very strong concrete roof over the 2 garages to support a 2nd-storey extension. This extension here, which was built by my mother. This end part was used as the family air raid shelter during the war, and apparently the door, the reinforced steel door, is still there. And as I mentioned earlier, rather unfortunately, their happy family life ended in 1932, when Olive was drowned on holiday at Llangennis on the Gower. Having 2 young daughters and a hectic professional life, Fox needed to remarry, and I am the eldest son of his second marriage. I was born in 1934, when my father was 51, and what are my abiding memories of life in Rhiwbina? Climbing the tombpath, walking up the lane at the top of Wenalt Road to the Murray Thriplins at Newhouse. Peter and Leslie, family friends, were both keen amateur archaeologists and very good. Stopping on the way for a glass of fresh, warm cow's milk from their farm tenants, Mr. and Mrs. Champion. But the earliest has to be in those 2 hot summers of 1938 and 1939, helping, if you can call it that, the farmer in the field. The gate was just beyond this house here, haymaking and riding his cart horse. And as a quick aside, that riding on a farmhorse has lived with me all my life. The other thing I remember is looking out over our bottom hedge here at the golf course and the players, which would shortly be all ploughed up as part of the Dig for Victory campaign. In 1940, after the evacuation from Dunkirk, the less severely injured were moved to hospitals throughout the land to convalesce. I vividly recall watching a train of GWR mainline coaches drawn by a named engine of the 460 Hall class, filled with soldiers in sky blue hospital clothing, and somebody else remembers that too, I can see, waving to us gathered there as it headed past Rhiwbina for Whitchurch, where the former mental hospital was converted for their use. This was particularly notable as it was thought the curves were too tight for mainline stock to negotiate this branch line. In 1941 and 42, when the bombing campaign started in earnest, Cardiff and its docks was a major target. One night, woken by the noise of distant gunfire, I went into my father's study. So I was in here. I went into my father's study, the back room, the one with the bow window at the back, and excited by the spectacle, I watched the flames, the searchlights, and listened to the gunfire and the bombs. Being so far away and so young, I couldn't appreciate that spectacular display was accompanied by multiple deaths and untold damage. A more mundane casualty of the war was digging up the football pitch, which I've just seen has been properly restored, beside Lonisa for more allotments. So for those of us who used it, we used to use it to go across. Instead of cutting across the field, we had to go round now, so when making our way either to the shops or to the station. And finally, I recall 2 friends in Lonisa I used to meet up with, Roger Arkle and his near neighbour Graham Roberts. I've often wondered how they had fared over the years. And of course, above all, who could forget that end of the war VE Day Lonisa street party? Tables all down the road, homemade bunting and decorations, and laden with home-cooked food. That was a night that everybody will remember. Returning to the man we are honouring today, it is probably not unique, but certainly exceptional for an avowedly English, self-effacing man of yeoman stock, as he would often recall, to have his name recorded for posterity on this plaque here in Wales. As the years have passed and generation has succeeded generation, there are few still around who can remember the genuine affection with which he was held by people throughout Wales. Always known as Dr. Fox, he would be contacted by farmers, by local societies, by all levels of society to investigate things that they had found or knew about in their house or on the land. Equally at home, in a farmhouse or manor, he had immense charm and an abiding interest in all things Welsh, and the vital importance of passing on this knowledge for future generations to know and to understand its historical significance. It is appropriate to recall what he achieved as director, apart from turning the museum from a local national institution into an international one. Following his appointment in 1925, over the succeeding 6 years, he undertook a complete survey of Offa's Dyke, which still remains as a vital source for historians studying this incredible earthwork. He had a deep interest in Welsh bygones, the artefacts of life and industry, which he made into a separate department, and eventually would lead to the establishment of the museum at St Fagans. He excavated and recorded archaeological sites throughout the Principality, and from 1938 was required by the Ministry of Works to undertake excavations of potential bronze and Iron Age sites that would have to be destroyed by wartime airfields and depots, including in 1943 RAF Valley in Anglesey, where Llyn Cerrig was being drained. There, in the mud of the lake, he located and reconstructed the first Bronze Age chariot to be found in Britain. After the war, he approached Lord Plymouth, a member of the Museum Council, owner of St Fagans Castle, which the family no longer used, and persuaded him to donate it to the National Museum. In cooperation with another of the council members, Lord Raglan, he wrote and personally illustrated the 3-volume study of vernacular architecture in Monmouthshire, which would lead indirectly to this subject becoming an independent academic study. Perhaps his greatest accolade was that he was admired and honoured by his peers and contemporaries, being elected president or chairman of all the professional bodies with archaeological and museum that he was associated with, including ones in as far afield as East Anglia. Nationally, he had been included in the Jubilee Honours of 1935, being the first archaeologist to be knighted, and in 1940 he was made a Fellow of the British Academy. When my father retired, my mother was offered a post at Exeter University, so in 1948 they sold Four Elms and moved to Devon. The initials CFOF, engraved in that plaque that you can see above the front door, remained for many years, telling of the man and his wife who built it. When I came back here some 40 years later to show my late wife where I was born, they had been removed. It was just plain. Now in their stead is Four Elms, which I'm delighted to see. But unfortunately, it is really just number 17. Now there will be a permanent reminder of this internationally renowned archaeologist and polymath, whose service in the cause of Welsh history is unique and deservedly recognised by this community, where he enjoyed the happiest years of his life, and which to his dying day he always considered, as you will be able to see at the top of the plaque in the Welsh inscription, that this house in Rhiwbina was home. It now gives me very great pleasure and considerable pride to unveil this plaque to a well-loved man of Wales.